So Trump confirms U.S. seizure of a oil vessel off Venezuela, says other things are happening. The U.S. has seized a sanctioned oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela. Okay, U.S. President Donald Trump said on Wednesday a move that sent oil price higher and sharply escalated tensions between Washington and Caracas. We've just seized a tanker on the coast of Venezuela, large tanker, very large, largest one ever, actually, and other things are happening, Trump said, who has been pressuring Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro to step down. Trump did not offer additional details. Asked what would happen with the oil, he said, "We keep it, I guess." Trump has repeatedly raised the possibility of U.S. military intervention in Venezuela. This incident was the first known action against an oil tanker since he ordered a massive military buildup in the region. The U.S. has carried out strikes against suspected drug vessels, which raised concern among lawmakers and legal experts. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi posted on social media platform X that the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and the U.S. Coast Guard, along with support from the U.S. military, carried out a seizure warrant for a crude oil tanker used to transport sanctioned oil from Venezuela and Iran. A 45-second video posted by Bondi showed two helicopters approaching a vessel and armed individuals in camouflage rappelling onto it. Venezuela's government said in a settlement that the seizure constitutes a blatant theft and an act of international piracy. What that mean? Blatant threat and act of international piracy. Under these circumstances, the true reasons for the aggression prolonged aggression against Venezuela have finally been revealed. It has always been about our natural resources, our oil, our energy, the resources that belong exclusively to the Venezuelan people. The statement said Trump administration official did not name the vessel. British Maritime Risk Management Group Vanguard said the tanker skipper was believed to have been seized off Venezuela early on Wednesday. The U.S. has imposed sanctions on the tanker for what Washington said was involved in Iranian oil trading when it was called Adisa. What that? Okay. The skipper left Venezuela's main oil port, Jose between December 1st and 5th after loading Venezuela's very heavy crude, according to satellite information analyzed by tankertracker.com and internal shipping data from PDVSA, the state-run oil company. Oil futures rose following news of the seizure after trading in negative territory. Global Brent crude futures rose 27 cents or 0.4% to settle at $62.21 US a barrel, while US West Texas intermediate future gained 21 cents or so 0.4% to close at $58.46 US per barrel. Maduro on Wednesday spoke at a march commemorating a military battle without addressing report of the tanker seizure. The seizure comes a day after the U.S. military flew a pair of fighter jets over the Gulf of Venezuela in what appeared to be the closest that warplanes had come to the South American country's air space. U.S. wants to control oil resources. U.S. wants to control oil reserves. Maduro. Venezuela exported more than 900,000 barrels per day of oil last month, the third highest monthly average so far this year, as PDVSA imported more naphtha to dilute its extra heavy oil output, even amid increasing pressure over Maduro. Washington had not moved to interfere with the country's oil flows. Venezuela has had to deeply discount its crude to its main buyer, China, due to growing competition which sanctioned oil from Russia and Iran. This is just yet another geopolitical sanction headwind hammering spot supply availability. Rory Johnston, an analyst with the commodity context, said, seizing this tanker further inflamed those prompt supply concerns, but also does not immediately change the situation fundamentally because these barrels were already going to be floating around for a while. Johnston said Chevron, which partners with the PDVSA, said on Wednesday that its operations in the country are normal and continuing without disruption. The company, which is responsible for all Venezuelan crude export to the U.S. state, last month increased crude export to the U.S. to some 150,000 BPD from 128,000 BPD in October. Maduro has alleged that the U.S. military buildup off Venezuela's coast is aimed at overthrowing him and gaining control of the OPEC nation's vast oil reserves. Since early September, the Trump administration has carried out more than 20 strikes against suspected drug vessels in the Caribbean and Pacific, killing more than 80 people. Experts said the strike may be illegal, illegal since there has been little or no proof made by public that the boats are carrying drugs or that it was necessary to blow them out of the water rather than stop them, seize their cargo, and question those on board. Okay. Concerns about the strikes increased this month after report that the commander overseeing the operation ordered a second strike that killed two survivors. In a sweeping strategy document published last week, Trump said his administration's foreign policy focus would be on reassuring its dominance in the Western Hemisphere. Democratic Sen Chris Van Hollen, a member of s- the how do I spell? How do I Senate Foreign Relations Committee said that seizure. Okay, seizure of the oil tanker by the U.S. cast doubt on the administration's stated reason for the military buildup and both strikes in the region. This shows that their whole cover story, that this is about interdicting drugs. Interdicting. What does interdicting means? Oh yeah, ban is a big lie. The senator said, "This is just one more piece of evidence that this is really about a regime change by force." Vincent P. O'Hara, a naval historian and author of the greatest naval war ever fought, called the seizure very unusual and provocative. As far as the principle of seizing ships on the high sea, there's an important international question. He said, nations go to war over that principle. Okay. And uh, all this is about Maduro. Okay, this is Canadian news. Okay, Canada become the first country to list extremist network 764 as terrorist. Canada has become the first country to list extremist network 764, known for preying on young people online. What the preying on? Okay, preying on some kind of yeah, eating. As a terrorist entity, the federal government announced Wednesday, Ottawa, how do I, Ottawa? Yeah, I know the Ottawa. Ottawa added four new organizations to the crime code list of terrorist entities. 764, Maniac, Mother Cult, Telegram Collective, the Islamic State, Mozambique. In the state, the government says 764, Maniac, Mother Cult, and Telegram Collective use social media and online game platforms to recruit and radicalize individuals. Radicalize is yes, uh, cause to adopt a radical position. Individuals spread propaganda. Okay, prop. What propaganda? Spread propaganda and violent extremist narratives and incite violence both online and offline. Police in Canada has increasingly been warning parents about 764, described by authorities as nihilistic. What that nihilistic? Oh, 허무주의. Nihilistic. The government describes their motives as seeking to destroy civilized society through violence and chaos, not as a step toward a new state, but rather, rather as an end itself. Members routinely use various social media and gaming platforms, particularly those with the young and marginalized user base. Marginalized. Okay. Yes. Yes. Through treated as insignificant. Marginalized user bases to lure, 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 groom, and extort use to commit lure, groom, and extort used to commit violence and sexual act, including self-harm. It said in February 2024, police in Lisbridge, uh, Arbatown? What's Arbatown? Okay, Arbatown. Charged 14-year-old boy with a series of offenses, including making, distributing child pornography. Oh my God. Police allege he was a member of 764, and just a few weeks ago, police in Halifax charged a young who was allegedly involved in the online extremist group with the child pornography charges. Oh, many child pornography. That young person is accused of communicating with hundreds of young youth worldwide Okay, listing groups in a criminal code gives the federal government the power to freeze or seize property, vehicles, and money, along with giving Canadian law enforcement additional tools to prosecute terrorist offensive. 기소 terrorist offensive of terrorist offenses. In a speech last month, the head of the Canadian Security Intelligence Service warned about the number of young people becoming radicalized. Why? Worryingly, nearly 1 in 10 terrorism investigation at CSIS now includes at least one subject of investigation under the age of 18, Director Dan Rogers said to a crowd of invited guests at the National Art Center in downtown Ottawa. Fortunately, he said, only a small number of youth or adults with extreme views resort views okay how do I resort to violence. But when they do, the consequences are devastating, he said. The government also listed Islamic State Mozambique, a non-branch of Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, as an armed insurgent group. The insurgent group seeking to replace the governing authority with a Sharia law-based government by seizing territory, infiltrating civilian populations, and security forces, and committing violence act of terrorism. Crazy. Okay. Uh, uh, oh my god. Okay, and world news. Mm, mm, okay, another news. Okay, who won this week's parliamentary pipeline game? Oh, okay, interesting news. Trump's point man on trade fought separately with Canada and Mexico. Uh, okay. Trump's point man trade deal fought Okay, U.S. President Donald Trump's lead trade negotiator says the administration is considering breaking up the three-way free trade agreement with Canada and Mexico, moving toward moving toward separate deals instead. U.S. Trade Representative uh, how do I pronounce his name? Jamieson Greer said Wednesday the Trump administration is keeping or options on the table for the future of the Canada-US-Mexico agreement (CUSMA) as it comes up for renewal in 2026. But Jamieson Greer, who play a key role in all trade negotiations, including the looming review of CUSMA, looming is laying out a strong case for separate bilateral deal with the country's northern southern neighbors. Means mm, strong layout, strong case for separate bilateral deal countries. Okay, layout strong for a separate. Okay, a move that would end 30 years of North America having a unified free trade agreement. Why do they want to break CUSMA? Our economic relationship with Canada is very, very different than our economic relationship with Mexico. Grillo told an event held by the Atlantic Council, a Washington-based think tank focused on international affairs. The labor situation is different. The import-export profile is different. The rule of law is different. So it makes sense to talk about things separately with Canada and Mexico, he said. I think they they're being uh how do I say negotiating separately. All three countries must indicate by July 1st of next year whether they want to extend the agreement, negotiate its terms, or let it expire. Korea must provide a report to the U.S. Congress on 80 days before the deadline by January 2nd. That would signal the administration's intentions, already talking separate to. As I said, I told you that already talking separate to Canada and Mexico. He didn't drop any hint during Wednesday conversation about which way the White House is leaning when it comes to CUSMA. Could it be excited? Yeah, it could be excited. Could it be revised? Yes. Could it be negotiated? Yes. Greer said all of those things are on the table. It's not clear. However, he strongly hinted there was a potential for splitting the agreement into separate bilateral bilateral deals with Canada and Mexico. We are already talking to them separately, Grill said. I have not had a meeting this year where I sat with Canada and Mexico in a room. We sat together and talked about U- USMCA. Oh, he's added, what is using the US acronym used for the agreement. Greer's comment echo remarks made to Politico last week when he said he discussed the possibility of separate negotiation with the US president just recently. The present view is he only wants deal. There are a good deal. The reason why we built a review period into USMC was in case we needed to revise it, review it, or exit it, he told the outlet. It almost comes on the heel of a public consultation held in Washington last week, in which industry after industry extolled the extol the virtue of the Canada-US-Mexico agreement and urged the Trump administration not to abandon it. And Greer appeared before the U.S. Senate subcommittee on Tuesday, telling senators that one of his key goals is tightening Kuzma's rules of origin. The what the uh, nitty-gritty details in the agreement that determine whether a product qualifies for tariff-free access to all three countries based on its content. Several U.S. industries accuse some Canadian firms of exploiting Kuzma's rules of origin by putting cheap content from China into their product, then selling them in the US under the deal's preferential terms. Creel told the Atlantic Council event that rule of origin are a top that may fit best in a three-way deal with Canada and Mexico. He suggested critical minerals and alignment of external trade policies could also be part of a trilateral agreement, a sign he isn't completely casting aside the prospect of a deal between three countries. Uh, Good.